A lot of interference, a lot of glitches there. Somebody was trying to stop this video. No worries. Bring the princess chair. All right. That's great. That worked. Let's see. I'll take the whole screen now. You see the princess chair? So, let's talk about birthdays, shall we? And, I really do want to thank all the people that said happy birthday to me yesterday on social media. To be quite honest, I didn't even check into Facebook yesterday. I just didn't want to deal with it. Now, I remember my birthday in 2015, which was my first year online, and what a beautiful occasion it was. Really bad audio, too, during this hack. As it was playing out. And then in 2016, it just wasn't the same kind of bang. You know what I mean? And to me, it's funny how grown people expect so much on their birthday like they're still a kid, hoping to get the thing that they didn't get. Now, believe me, here again, I still completely appreciate everyone that did take the time to say happy birthday. But here again, what is our birthdays? What's it all about? Now, yesterday, on my birthday, I was getting harassed, in one of those coded message videos from the Search Channel lot, all about the princess, and how the princess, of course, doesn't have any parents, or if they're lucky, they have one, and proceeded to just do a whole stick the knife in the back, and instead of focusing on the human being, he does a whole spin-off on Disney, like the Grimm brothers or any of those other scary stories weren't around prior to the Disney Corporation. Here again is your shiny bauble. And in the video yesterday I did mention, let's think about Hansel and Gretel. That's a fairy tale as old as time. This poor brother and sister in the woods. The parents can't feed them. There's a mom and dad that actually cares, but they can't feed them. So they send them out into the woods. And of course they come across a gingerbread house where a witch catches them and fattens them, tries to fatten them up in a cage, but the one doesn't eat, and it's a whole wretched story. And of course, in the end, they throw the witch in the cauldron and get that heck out of Dodge. Hey, it's day 2 on social media, no cussing. We're working on habits and addictions, I see. Anyhow, the whole point of the princess story is I'm about the farthest thing that you can come from being a princess with my background. So as a child, since I didn't live a fairy tale life, with all the pomp and circumstance of any good child that is torn and ripped to shreds when one of their parents is knocked off that pedestal. Well, that was never me. And of course, in the end, I'm blessed by winding up being able to love my parents and love the kids, my own children, that don't say happy birthday to their mom. So, I think that's why a lot of the time parents, I mean, like, say if you're an adult and you're having a birthday, the best thing to do is go out, have a nice dinner, have a few cocktails, make light of the whole thing. I mean, I myself would dig shopping on my birthday, but I'm not in that position to do so. And so, the whole thing is the most fun for people about birthdays, is teasing them about being another year older. And here again, I think that's one of the saddest things you can do to someone that you love or that you call a friend. To tease them, whether it's about their memory, or their physicality, or their lack of a current day story. I think it spins people into a whole world of nightmares, to be quite honest. And here again, I'm not the one having nightmares. I'm the one. I'm trying to talk about the years it took to work through nightmares and do life charting and things. So, today, I want to talk a little bit about my parents. And, of course, like we know, it's not polite to talk about people's lives or dox them or use their real names or tell stories. It's much better to wind it into a murder mystery or into a alleged comedy show, you know, where you really don't name the players. You protect them by giving them an alias. Are you kidding? They still know who these people are. I mean, in any good TV show, you can call him Mr. X, but sure as anything, you'll know who that player, who that actor is. And in the meantime, we have people that are really traumatized by this whole subject of being part of a script without consenting to be one or even knowing that you're involved in a script. And like I've explained, your script is your real. And then, let's say you're not around to act them out. Let's say that you're too busy. Well, they'll bring an actor in to play out your script, come to find out. I mean, really, the show must go on, I think is the saying. And that's what I've learned. So, let's consider a parent's script that is born during World War II. So, in the case of my father, he was born in 1940. In case of my mother, she was born in 1944. Now, like Chanters said, and my mom was an only child. She was one of those love babies born, you know, from two parents that actually do love each other being ripped apart. And poof, up goes those hormones. And the next thing you know, a 37-year-old woman is getting knocked up by her husband. And so that's how Barbara came into this world, my mom. Alright. Now, my dad, he was born to a woman that was told, don't have another child, it could kill you. And that all comes down to the negative blood type that we've discussed. And this story is spinning so out of control now between what are the differences between positive and negative blood. But simply put, when a negative blood mother and a positive blood father reproduce, inflammation is the end result. So, when my dad's mom was pregnant, there was no Rogam shot, and birth control wasn't discussed among civilized society, believe it or not. This is in the past 100 years. Mind-blowing, right? Which is why I've done videos on it. So, my dad was sickly, let's say. You know, not as healthy as he should have been, just like many of us. You know, there's toxins or exchanges that happen, all sorts of chemicals when you're in utero. And that played out in my grandmother and her son's life, you see. Now, Chanter's fascination is what you do when you are alone in the world and you don't have your mommy and daddy to take care of you anymore. So what we're going to do is we're going to relate to this chart. First off, to show you when someone passes. And then we'll go back to childhood. And this is my dad's glass cock. You know, it's a big deal here at the big yellow house. You see it matches and everything. My dad made this when he was in police reserve. And there's a terrible story behind this bat. And I don't think I'll ever tell it, to be quite honest. It's not in my repertoire. But I do like it as a pointer. Okay, let's get my dad's life chart up here and we'll talk a little bit about this. And I'll actually be able to bring the camera down here. Oh, I did want you to notice too, I am in a princess chair today. And I bought this when my first granddaughter was a little baby and she used to sit on it here at the big yellow house. Okay, let's turn the lights on. So, my mom and my dad both passed in 2010. And you guys have seen these in a different form a million times at the wakes you all go to now. So it's a picture board of the family and of the deceased. But you know, when you look at those boards, they don't have storyline with them. And this is a life chart, and I think it would always be a great thing when you're remembering your loved ones that you can actually timeline their journey. It doesn't need to come from them in a sealed indictment, does it? Okay. So this is my dad's farm, and I put this clipping in there out of his little memorial thing that someone sent. Death is the road, life is the traveler, the soul is the guide. And my dad always wanted to retire and go live out in the country where his kin came from. And he wound up purchasing this acreage. I can't think of the name of where it is now. It's in Missouri, Phelps County. How could I ever forget? And little did he know his neighbors were crackheads, and you know, by this time he had had many strokes and was driving out to this farm. We had to worry about him. Worry about Grandpa Grumpy here, you know. My mom and my brother took that land from him, made up a story. It was really ugly. Now, I wasn't traumatized by this because even as a kid, I was aware enough and not fragmented by the trauma to see what was going on between these two people that I loved and that I called Mom and Dad. So you see, I take this stuff very seriously. And of course here, our mind thinks of death, our heart thinks of life, and our soul longs for immortality. So of course, my dad was a member of the Blue Knights, you know, the law enforcement motorcycle. And here in Glasscock County, Georgia, standing by the sheriff's car, he was very proud. And I wish he would have known more about his lineage. But, of course, now he absorbs it all through my experience, you see. And that's why you never want to mourn the dead. You want to celebrate the life of the person that has transmuted their form. You see, here he is standing under the Glasscock County sign marker, right? He was a brilliant mechanic. And by this point, we're going down all the way, I would say, in his last 30 years of life. Just as we're scanning this. Okay. Now, before I tell you more about my dad, let's jump into my mom. And of course, turn my chair a little bit. Okay, so my mom was very sickly at the end of her days. And the way that she got away from my dad was by pulling the HIPAA law in a hospital after she had had a quadruple bypass. And, you know, when someone lives their whole life basically eating like a pig and drinking nothing but soda and being depressed and being mentally ill, well, you see, you wind up sick really, 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 really fast. I'm talking about body and every other thing. This woman was strong as an ox, but shoot, by the time she was in her 40s, it was all over. Now, these would be the meds that at the end of her life that she was taking and the doctors that she was seeing. And I thought that that'd be really important to keep on a timeline. And she did get to see her oldest granddaughter graduate high school, and that made her happy. And of course, here's her handlers at Emerson Electric. Like I told you, a legally blind woman running the copy center. We're talking about the world headquarters of the only Fortune 5 company left in St. Louis. Unless now Pfizer's up there. I mean, surely Bear Monsanto.
Fortune 500.
They have a lot of lawsuits. There's the address of the nursing home my mom lived in the end of her days. And you can see this is great, from 2007. Please do not visit me anymore, and do not call me on the phone. Thank you. You guys think I'm cold. You gotta be kidding. Okay, so we're looking at two people at the end of their days. I mean, in a physical body, right? And like I said, my dad would have been 70. My mom, 66. And 2010 was the year. I mean, most people wouldn't be able to survive both of their parents passing in the same year. I mean, think about that. Think about how much trauma there is when a mom or dad passes. Now, the trauma and tears can be equal depending on which strong feeling that you had for that person. So you could love somebody so much you couldn't do without them. Here, you could loathe them so much that when they passed, the guilt would be enough to just put you there, right? Well, see, that had to be wrong in my book. Otherwise, I would have never survived my childhood. And I think that that's where most people get so fragmented that there's really no way back home for them. I hope that makes sense. Okay. No, like I said, 2010, I started the hair emporium here in Ferguson. So, in the same month that I was having to do the song and dance here for a crazy skeleton jury, well, I'm saying goodbye to both of these people. But you know, when you show yourself as a strong individual and survive it, boy, people get pissed at you. I mean, you're supposed to shut down and be as pathetic as they would be. And this is where you really start to upset people. So, my apologies if anybody feels like that's pathetic, to roll over and be able to no longer function, whether it's your parent or your child or your situation. Because in today's world, it's happening rampantly. So when I did my dad's life chart, I had to go ahead and put the stories that I knew. From knowing my father, him and I were very close. He absolutely did not spoil me. You can be close to somebody without it being materialistic. I was allowed to go in his garage and help him load bullets into a greasing gun, or take him some tea, or just talk to him during ads on a TV show. And there's always great memories that show you how either you want to be or you don't want to be. And I use a lot from my life to show me what I did not want to be. See, that can be as good as the kind of motivation where somebody throws you in a box and says, you will do everything that has been done before you, and there will be
continuity.
That's a conundrum.
Right,
You know,
continuity.
Continuance of your family. Let me tell you something interesting. When we get into all the timeline of how the setup happened in my script, this house that I grew up in isn't even there anymore. Neither is the address. So if you search for 9836 Lewis and Clark, it'll look like it was never there. You can see this is when my dad started being a policeman. You see how young. And of course, he's so proud there with me, right? This is a fight that occurred when my dad was around 9 or 10 years old, a fight in the country. And we're just going to go over what the titles say. So, tempers grow hot in a road dispute. Scruggs tries proving that other roads go to market for nickels. Now, nickels is kin to the Glasscocks. Road case reopens with continuation of verbal fights. Road feud to court again. Kills self with shotgun. Now, that would be Alfred Gay Bennett, not my side of the family. 52-year-old farmer of 10 miles south of Columbia died at the Boone County Hospital at 1:30 Thursday afternoon, 4 hours after his face was ripped by a shotgun blast. Coroner E.J. Ward said he killed himself and that no inquest will be held. Then they go into the funeral service. Ward said that Mr. Bennett apparently went berserk at the farm home where he and his mother, Mrs. Ida Polly Bennett, about 75, lived, and turned the gun on himself after attempting to kill her. You gotta love somebody like that. Can't live without him. So we'll just take you out. Alright, let's see. The shooting was discovered by a group of neighbors who went to the Bennett place in a heavily wooded area 2.5 miles southeast of Pierpont School after Mrs. Bennett telephoned for help. According to neighbors and relatives, Mr. Bennett had been despondent for several days. About 11 o'clock yesterday morning, they said, he told his mother that no one cared for him and that he believed the best way out would be to kill both himself and her. He then got a shotgun, the aged woman said, but she wrestled with him and took it away from him. In the process, the gun went off and blasted a hole in the kitchen ceiling. Mr. Bennett then got another shotgun, but his mother took it away from him also. He ran outside the house and she called her daughter, Mrs. Eliza Colvin, who lived near the Nashville church about 2.5 miles southwest, to ask for help. A neighbor, Mrs. Leon Winfrey, heard the call and heard Mrs. Bennett say that she was having trouble with her son. She started for the place. On the way, she passed the farm of Mr. and Mrs. Rose Fisher of Columbia and stopped in to tell them there was trouble at the Bennett home. The Fishers were spreading Thanksgiving on their farm. The group started to the Bennett's place but decided that the sheriff would be called. At the Watt Sheevan's place, they called Sheriff Duke Monahan and asked him to send help. Monahan, who had arrived back from a trip to Kansas after a prisoner late the night before, was still in bed, but he called deputies Tom Estepee and Charlie Whitworth and told them to go to the scene of the trouble. While the group was still at the Cheevan's place, they heard a shot, which was probably the second fired by Mr. Bennett. The entire group then went to the Bennett place adjoining the Fisher farm, where they found Mrs. Bennett hiding behind an outhouse. When they went into the house, they found Bennett sitting on the floor, a shotgun beside him. His face was shot away, but he was still conscious and talked rationally. They called the sheriff again to report the shooting, and then called Parker's ambulance, which met them as they took Mr. Bennett to the hospital about halfway to town. The group had already left with the injured man when the sheriff's deputies arrived. Mr. Bennett was admitted to the hospital, where he died about 1:30. Ward, on duty as a telegraph operator at the football game, was called at the game. Mr. Bennett was born in Boone County, September 10th, 18. The son of Warder and Ida Pauley Bennett. He was a bachelor. Sure he was. Other survivors are 3 sisters. Mrs. Colvin, Mrs. Verda Payne of Columbia, and Mrs. Ibis Richardson, Rocheport, and 2 brothers, Freddie Bennett, Centertown, and Edward Bennett, Columbia. Jeez. So we see Richardson, which is a cousin. Well, no, Richardson's my grandma's maiden name. So you see how close families marry and everybody's related, I guess, is what that proves, right? How trippy. Yeah, because here we have Mrs. Heinen Richardson of Ashland dies at 68. What a trip. And then, of course, Edward Lloyd Sapp. Sapp is another name from Ashland, Missouri. So this is close pickings. But you can see, there's my grandma and grandpa's engagement picture. You can see why a mechanic making 3 times the money that was traumatized from a childhood decides to become a policeman to take care of his children. Now that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, could anybody say it doesn't make sense? If they do, they're, like ignorant to how life works. This is my dad's childhood years. There's his brother, who lived here in Ferguson. My dad trying to get up all the girls' skirts, huh? I mean, he's just holding them. But see, that's how people get ideas. There's my mom and dad. And I would say that was when they were married. Okay. So, time to do my mom's. When we talk about these MK Ultra projects and Chanter Makes Fun, I'd like to hear his response to my grandfather being the managing editor of the Custer Combateer. I have all the handwritten letters. I have all of the paperwork. And of course, what happened, we're talking about death. So, this poor woman who died so uncomfortable and in so much pain and so sad and unable to see the truth of the world. Well, see, when her dad passed, she cut off all her hair and became a boy. Does that make sense, Chanter? And for anybody else out there that's suffering, she believed that her dad wanted a son. But I have all the paperwork where he writes to his wife and says, hey, I'm just as happy with a girl. And even gave a list of girls' names first, which of course my grandmother ignored because she was so sad being pregnant without her husband there. So here again, I mean, only someone with no heart could blame their parent for the childhood and situation their parent had. And really, only a demon or a jackass could then blame that person's parent when they were doing the best they could. The best they could. So when you talk about your parents being there for you or not, I mean, your parents could be in the house all day and never speak a word to you. Does that mean they're there for you? I mean, what about if they're actually the one torturing you? My mom burned me with boiling water. I mean, how do you think you should relate to someone that you can't trust, even if they're your parent? You surely still have to love them. You have to. It's how we learn to survive our human experience. There is the one picture of my mom smiling, and I cherish that picture. She's on the left in a white blouse.
On the right.
And that little face down there is me. And that little boy on the left is Norman. And I've told that story before. And I love Norman. That's why I named my dog Norman. Okay. And here is a picture from my wedding day with the woman that raised me, my grandmother, in the middle. This is a letter from my grandfather discussing his true feelings. And any man that has the courage to do that is a real man. And so I'm very proud of my grandfather, Addison Vernon Mitchell, and also of my grandfather, Ewing Connolly Glasscock. Very proud of my mom, Barbara the Barbarian, and her mother, Hazel Leela Kirkpatrick. You see, this is what family does. And even when it's as embarrassing as all hell, you don't deny it. Because, boy, when it comes back and busts you in the ass, you have to be so embarrassed, don't you? And this reminds me right here a lot of Chanter, like what he tried to pull on me the other night when he wanted me to talk to him and didn't know what I meant. So, for anyone that tries to pull that on me, realize my own mom did it. So, this is dated September 21st, 1990. And it says, Susie, I miss y'all very much. You said in a few months, so I didn't answer. Anytime you'd like to talk, just let me know. I am very hurt and surprised to know that I have been making things wrong for 26 years. Love, Mom. And that is one of the pieces of her fragmented persona. That's the little girl. That's the one that really does love who she believes is her little girl. And that would be me. Now, in the meantime, I have stated that even though these are my parents, and I do carry the DNA from these bloodlines, like I've said, my true mother and father are the divine creator. Just like if you guys want, you accept that Godhead, that source, as your true mother and father. The ones that started the ability to say, poof, let there be life, and let there be light, and let there be love. So, even if you're normal, and you have these regular parents that are always together, and everything's sunshine, happy place, well, you've got two sets of parents. And if your parents remarry, well, then you've got more sets of parents. So, at this point, my princess bud says that it takes a child or a community. Maybe it takes a child to raise a community. It's always been, it takes a community to raise a child. Maybe the child raises a community. What do I know? Seriously. But, here again, when it comes to charting the human life, this would be the book right here. The Human Life, written by George and Gisela O'Neill. And like I said, these people escaped Nazi Germany and relocated to St. Louis, Missouri. And this is where the life charting concept was put to paper with an artistic chart. And I've showed that on one of, I've shown it at least 24 times through the Sophia's Emporiums and the life charting series that nobody knows about, or, oh, it's too traumatic to look at, Lord have mercy. Whatever. This is where it all started. And of course, Steiner is the guy that started it. And Steiner is who everybody should be talking about from this time forward, instead of Blavatsky or Crowley. I mean, talk about uncultured. Steiner was in Europe. Crowley and Blavatsky were here in the States. The 7 soul types. I've done a video on that, and that's basically different things like dominant or internalized. Aesthetic. It's another one. Aggressive. Different little tags to your personality. But really, you want to be the rare type. And of course, I get mocked for working through my whole life to be able to say, yeah, I'm a rare type, sure. And they go, you arrogant liar. It's like, no, I'm not. And it's time for you guys to catch up and learn. It's all given freely and with love. Why do you have to beat it upside the head? But I know why. And I know about the war. So it's fine. Fundamentals in therapy. Steiner was versed on multiple subjects, and this would be the treatment of the human, different medicants, and different ways of dealing with mentally and physically handicapped individuals. Twin roads to the new millennium. So while everybody mocks this twin flame thing, think about this: twin roads, twin paths, twin flames. Awakening the community. Self-explanatory. But of course, Dr. Rudolf Steiner, his own self, left the planet early because of all the chaos and these three different groups of anthroposophists that just found it necessary to battle and argue. Temper tantrums amongst different classes of people. And yeah, he had private lectures. He didn't let the masses in to the deeper ones because he knew it would shatter their reality. Just like online. Just like we've seen with Chanter and a whole bunch of other people. And you think Chanter's got it hard? Wait till you meet the poor schleps in this whole Elvis controversy, and I tie it together and put a bow on it. Which I'll be doing too. Probably today. I have to do some serious phone calls. This is my warm-up to get me in the mood to push through this day and do what I need to do and stand tall. The tension between the East and the West. Yeah, Chanter's heartbroken too because the doorway is Christ. Especially when you come from the West. Just like yoga. It's great for you. It really is. But it needs to be approached an entirely different way for Western civilization, as it does when the people that grew up with it since they were babies. That is the difference. It should be exchanged and shared in communities. Not nana boo-boo, you peed in my Cheerios. Initiation, eternity, and the passing moment. One of my first Steiner books. So, remember, here's what's going on too. And this is why people can be so dangerous to one another. From the time that you watch something with your eyes on any screen, or that you read something and bring it into you, you're forever changed. Now, considering some people think it's amazing they're using 10% of their brain, most people still think it's 4%. So even though you're forever changed, just like Chanter, you forget what you remembered. And at that point, you're supposed to go back and read it again. But I think a lot of people run off and go see somebody else about it, or just mock it, or completely ignore the facts that are right in front of their face. Hard to say. Alright, guys. I hope I didn't bum anybody's ideas out about their birthday. I really don't. But here again, You should always expect the best. And I do. But at the same time, you have to look at what you know to be true in the situation and get over the pain of the thing that would hold you back. And so with that, I do say peace, love, and light from the big yellow house on the third cosmic ray.